How do you feel?
I feel excited and really overwhelmed, but really excited.
Same. I'm so excited. This is wonderful.
Well, I got a chance to read Rebecca, not Becky, months ago, and to have this conversation, I have so many questions. But before I get into all the questions, I would love to hear you all read.
Ooh, y'all want to hear us read a little bit? Okay. Guess I'll start since I'm chapter 1. Okay. Chapter 1, DeAndrea. Even though DeAndrea Whitman was woefully behind schedule, she continued rearranging the fragrant long-stem lilies she'd purchased for the first summer soiree she didn't want to host. From the black linen place cards resting on elegant mini easels to the gold-rimmed china, everything DeAndrea envisioned for her and Malik's farewell friends gathering was perfect. Well, everything was perfect except having to say farewell. She couldn't believe they were leaving Atlanta in 3 weeks. How was that all the time they had left? Only 3 more weeks in the black oasis of Buckhead before they moved to the whiter-than-white suburb of Rolling Hills? Before Malik had to transfer to his consulting firm's Northern Virginia office, where he'd be the only black executive? And to accept that their 5-year-old daughter, Nina, wouldn't be a kindergartner at a Montessori school of black excellence? Now their sweet girl had to attend Magnolia Country Day School, some not as progressive as it thought it was private school that paled in comparison, literally and figuratively. And what kind of name for a town was Rolling Hills? Like, hills don't even roll. Only 3 more weeks of being black and bougie with my besties, DeAndrea wailed. Then I'll be living among the whites and be stuck dealing with Karen and Becky and all their caucasity.
I'll take this one. Okay, chapter 2. This feels like my wedding, by the way. There's a lot of people here from every part of my life. Thank you for being here. Okay. Okay, chapter 2, Rebecca. Rebecca Myland loved vacations. Scratch that, she loved planning vacations. Once she was on them, however, she didn't quite know what to do with herself. Even now, with all the elements present for a picture-perfect late summer escape, a vivid blue sky with not a single cloud, a light northeast breeze keeping the temperature just right, and a luxury rental home with a heated saltwater pool that could entertain her kids when she didn't feel like making the schlep to the beach, if only she could figure out how to sit still. Her family didn't have this same problem, of course. Why would she? Why would they? She had everything covered. Her husband, Todd, was currently still sleeping in. His brother, Jack, and wife, Tina, probably were too. Child-free and carefree, they could do whatever they wanted. But Rebecca had been watching her daughters play in the pool since practically the crack of dawn. At what age would they start sleeping in? Not that it mattered. Rebecca couldn't stay in bed past 6 a.m. anyway. Having finished arranging the to-do list categories in her latest organization app, Don't Let Me Forget, Rebecca side-eyed the book on the small table next to her lounger. She felt like the cover was judging her. Woke yet? Wake up. Understanding the history of race and racism. She hadn't cracked it open, which she felt bad about, but every time she'd get ready to pick it up, the girls would summon her with another, watch how many mermaid twists I can do, or do a boomerang of us jumping in. She would read the book on this trip, though, or at least start it. She'd already emailed the other moms, encouraging them to finish it before school started in a few weeks. Our first book club meeting of the year will be upon us before we know it, ladies. She knew she needed to take her own advice. But first, a little bit of Instagram.
As you can see, you immediately get to know both characters and you're drawn into the story. So before we start talking about that, I want to know how you two met and became co-authors.
Well, we actually became friends before we became co-authors. but before we became friends, we were colleagues. I was actually working at American University's Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center at the time. I was serving as managing director. And I met Catherine. She'd emailed the center and wanted to do a film screening at the National Anti-Racist Book Festival. And so had a chance to meet her. And I think like right off the bat, I was like, she's hilarious. We're gonna have a good time. And then, yeah, so we did the film screening and we kept in touch. And next thing I knew, we were like buddies. Right? I hope that's your version. What's your version?
Yeah, what's your version? I completely co-sign that version.
Okay.
Yeah, fast friends, actually, yeah.
Yeah. So then, how did this idea come to be? Especially this title, because it is the perfect title.
So everyone remembers 2020 when the world was on fire. And my agent at the time actually was like, she would just ask me a million questions every day. And I was just like, Emily, like, please, okay? Like, you know, I'm giving her a little bit, but come on. And she said, you know, it would be great if someone wrote a book, just like about a clueless white woman. And I was like, you want me to write a book about you? Like, what? No, Emily's great. And, but no, she was like, you know, so many people were having these conversations and only talking to the people that they felt, she felt comfortable talking to me. She felt comfortable asking me these questions. And at the time I was working on the Afro-Minimalist Guide. And I'm like, Emily, I do not have time to write a book, especially a book about a clueless white woman. Like, I do not have time. And she said, is there anyone that you would write the book with? And I was like, actually, I have the perfect person. And you could tell them how.
I mean, I was more than happy to write a book about clueless white women. Yeah. Yeah, I can write the book on that. Yeah, and so in that time, those of us, there are a lot of people here too who are, embedded in anti-racist work and thinking about these issues, and so we know that all of us were answering a lot of questions during that time. And we also saw a lot of things happening online that were kind of concerning, right? A lot of people were posting like their stacks of books that they had all bought from the anti-racism syllabus that was going around, and they were posting photographs of reading these books and not reading the books, but posting quotes from them and sharing things online, and it just felt like it was irresponsible and just a big performance. Exactly.
Yeah. And so, actually, Emily wanted to call it the Becky Chronicles. And I said, why don't we call it Rebecca, Not Becky? I had to fight for that title for a while, y'all. And then they got it. And I think, Catherine and I did a really good job of weaving that throughout the story. I don't want to give it away for folks, but, the title is what it needs to be. And it speaks to Rebecca as a character, and I think it speaks to so many people who want to do well, who want to do the right thing, and who just may not know how to do it. And I think with this book, we wanted to show this is what it looks like, right? And through my character, this is what it can feel like,
And I think that's like the perfect segue to my next question, because the characters are so distinct in their personalities, in their frustrations, in their perceptions. And I was really curious, how did you all shape those characters in a way that felt very authentic, but not pandering? Like they just came across as like real, fully developed people. And then also the life around them. So you don't only see them as characters, but you see the media community, you see the children. You guys do such a wonderful job of like building this world and inviting us in. Would you like to talk about how like you each created the characters?
Yeah, because there were a lot of iterations of the characters. We started off with, when the idea was, write a book about a clueless white woman. That's a caricature. That's someone that we want to make fun of and distance from ourselves. Those of us who are white women, like, I'm not like her, right? So originally, early versions and drafts were like that. It was making fun of her. A lot of it was making fun of myself too, knowing things that I had done in the past when I was learning, still learning. And just trying to work through that, you know? But then as we got through more and more drafts and had feedback from people who had read early versions, we wanted to make these women, and I wanted to make Rebecca a real person, right? I mean, that was really important because she does want to do the right thing. She is not often doing the right thing for a while, but she also just takes herself so seriously at first, and we really wanted to get her to a place where maybe all of us could take ourselves a little less seriously when we talk about these issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think with DeAndrea, I probably went in the opposite direction. I really did not want a trope, right? It was so important for me to really show a well-rounded Black woman, a whole Black woman. I wanted readers to see a healthy marriage, a happy marriage, and Catherine had to call me to the table because DeAndrea was living her best life that was very unrealistic. I was like,
This doesn't feel like a marriage.
yeah. I was like, of course he does everything. He was like cooking and cleaning and running, and it was just like, yeah. You know, and so I think, you know, that happens with character development, right? Like you just lean in almost a little too hard. And so, yeah, that's why, you know, if you co-author a book, you have to do it with like a really dear friend. 'Cause she called me to the table on DeAndrea Malik. And I think that's also what led us to really make sure that our characters, again, were whole women in and of themselves, but just like representative of women their age, right? And we're dealing with mothering. We're dealing with mothering our children, mothering our parents, mothering ourselves. Like we're going through all of these different things. And so we really wanted to make sure that these characters had full lives, right? You know, I think any character in their 40s, they're dealing with some parental stuff if their parents are still alive and they have a relationship with them, right? And so that led us to saying, what challenges could they be facing, you know?
And I really did appreciate that because not only are you looking at them dealing with motherhood, but you're also dealing, like, watching them deal with aging parents. And the book for me, my takeaways were there was this beautiful like focus on expectations and identity, societal expectations as mothers, as women, as we grow older, and then this idea of like breaking away from perfectionism and how do we do that without like betraying ourselves, right? So the part with the aging parents, I was really curious on why you decided to set the book in Rolling Hills, because that also plays a big theme in the book and has a lot of significance. What was that? Like, why was it that location for you both?
I'll let you start.
Well, you know, Rolling Hills is a very wealthy suburb. The Mylans, Rebecca's family, DeAndrea's family, they are wealthy. That is not our experience.
That is not our experience.
Yeah.
Also, shout out to Emily for My Land, Emily, My Land.
Yeah.
It's My Land.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
There
Emily's
you go.
idea.
Our agent, yeah.
Ah, okay. All right, good.
But it's interesting because when we go back to talking about the performance of anti-racism, you know, Rebecca has a sense of being very hospitable, right? She's welcoming. She wants everybody around her. And what I like about choosing this environment is that it invites people to think about, okay, well, here's an environment that is pretty wealthy. They have signs up that all are welcome here, but we know that that's actually not really true. And so there are layers to the story, and each one there's an invitation to say, let's go a little bit deeper, right? We want to talk about the stereotypes that happen, the expectations that people have, the capitalism. I mean, they're very deeply interested in acquiring things, keeping things. Rebecca grew up not with wealth, and she has it now, and she's desperate to hang on to it. And there's a lot left in the wake when you're so focused on trying to stay up at that level. Right. And so we just really wanted to really invite people to, at some layer, like at some level, think about is Rolling Hills, I mean, can you truly even be anti-racist living there? You know, like, what does that really mean? Is the existence of this
Well,
place?
can you? Like, I mean, and we're in Washington, D.C., so can we, and this is a wealthy area. Is that like a question you're posing, or do you feel like you answered that? in
I
the
think
book?
it's a question that we're posing that we want readers to think about. Is
Yeah.
this entire existence antithetical to social justice and liberation and equity? I mean, those are questions that come up in
Yeah.
this.
Wow.
It's
I mean,
a socialist book. No, I'm joking.
And then also, too, I mean, that led to the school dynamics,
Yeah.
right, with the Parent Diversity Committee. And I think with the aging parents, going back to that question, the parents, Rebecca's mom and DeAndrea's mother-in-law, are at a facility called Memory Hills. Not Memory Hills, Memory Village, I'm
Village.
sorry. I don't know if you all have heard about Dementia Village in the Netherlands. I am just fascinated by that level of care. I wrote a whole chapter that had to get scratched, sort of describing Memory Village, but that's neither here nor there. But one of the things that we found is that wealth is also a part of conversations around aging, right? And like, what does that feel like when you are in that space? And, you know, I remember going through that with my mom, right? Like just trying to find a senior apartment complex, right? And the wait list and is like either here or here, right? And so like, I think if we're gonna have conversations around race, around wealth, it's important to talk about the totality of it. So I think through the schools, through the communities that they live in, through where their aging parents are, all of these invite us to have these conversations to say, can we really have a parent diversity committee when there's no diversity at the school?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and what does that look like? And what does that feel like, right? Especially for DeAndrea, when you are that Black family that comes in and they're like, yes, you know, we got our diversity, right? Like, what does that feel like? What are the weighted responsibilities that come with that? And so we tried to show that dynamic. All of that is wrapped up in Rolling Hills.
Yeah, and you all do such a great job, and I'm really curious to hear how your backgrounds came to shape the narrative. You know, Catherine, you're a filmmaker. As you mentioned, you guys met at the Anti-Racism Festival. You were the director. How much of that played into your research, and how much of it was simply, you know, made up, or you did your own kind of different research? How did that come into play?
Well, with I'm Not Racist, Am I?, the documentary I made, which actually we screened it for the independent school community for the first time 9 years ago yesterday. And we've still been doing screenings of it. And we don't let anybody watch the movie unless you sit and have a dialogue about it afterwards that I and my colleagues led. And so I've been helping people have conversations about race for about 15 years now, even before that we had other films, and just getting to witness people talk about it. And we were in a lot of independent schools, corporations, churches, community centers all over the country in every region. And so all of the things that people are saying and asking and grappling with informs everything in Rebecca's chapters in this book, and the dialogue, where people are struggling, the missteps. It's all informed by that. And we have read the anti-racism syllabus, you know. We have done our research, and it's really infused, I think, in everything that happens in the book, but we wanted to make the book accessible, so it's easy to read.
Yeah.
And it's very funny.
Yeah, good,
Oh,
thanks.
thank you. And I think with DeAndrea, I mean, my middle name is Andrea. I'm a reformed lawyer. You know, I think what I wanted to show was a lot of what I experienced, a lot of what me and my friends talk about. One of the things that I really just applaud Amistad and Harper for is allowing our characters to be real, right? And so oftentimes you get with diverse characters, there's a lot of explanation, right? So I may say something like, "The hawk is out," DeAndrea said, knowing that it was so cold and chilly, right? Like you get like an explanation of it. And one of the things that I love is some of the early readers, they were like, I had to go look some stuff up, right? Like, what does that mean, right? Like the conversations that I have with my black friends and with my white friends look different and sound different sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we want to normalize that and show what that looks like, and show how we be talking about y'all, and y'all how y'all be talking about us, right? And and that in itself, as Catherine said, invites dialogue,
Yeah.
right? It invites conversation. It allows us to say, yo, this is how I feel, and I can't talk to you about it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk to my girlfriend about it, and here's what that looks like and why it feels okay.
Yeah. I appreciate that, because there were so many, at least for me, there were a lot of cringeworthy moments where I was like, oh my goodness, oh no, like why did she say that? And so every time I had that kind of like pull in, I knew it was something that needed to be addressed, because I'm just like,
Yeah.
I'm feeling uncomfortable because I recognize something.
Yeah.
And that recognition needs to be in books, in films, in these open spaces, so we can talk about it and unpack it.
And I love that you say that, because that was a big conversation that Catherine and I had, right? We didn't just want it to be like, clueless white woman, ha ha ha, right?
Yeah.
It was like, I wanted black folks to, we cut up too,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely,
It was like,
absolutely.
I want us to see ourselves and, the things that make us feel uncomfortable, the things that, I had some cringe-worthy moments writing,
Yeah.
writing those moments, right? Like, where's this coming from?
Yeah.
And I think Catherine and I, we were also able to address childhood, just some childhood memories as well. And one of the things that we realized is that we are of a generation that are teaching our children very differently, right? We are doing things so differently. But we have not healed and done some of our own work on what we went through, right? And so, like, you'll see a dynamic between the black characters where there's a sleepover, right? And the so many black parents have gone through this where we're like, you cannot sleep over that little white girl house. I am so sorry. Right? And I remember having those conversations with my daughter. I remember being afraid, right? And then looking at her and saying, she has no clue what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
She has no fear.
Yeah.
They are buddies. She is looking at me like, what are you talking about? Right? And that is my own internalized fear and memories, right? And we showed, like, what does that look like when you are parenting children who you are also teaching to be anti-racist? How do you,
Well, there are a couple examples. The sleepover is one where that tension of that dynamic of, this is what I want to put forth and teach, but this is, in reality, this is what I'm actually presenting, and what that means and how you reconcile that. I also wanted to talk through this feeling of hopefulness and optimism that comes from Rebecca's character quite often. And I don't know if it was supposed to be channeling like a toxic positivity, but like this kind of like pushing through Rebecca always does, when at times she probably needs to sit back and be quiet. So what was that, what were you trying to illustrate with that? That like at times we need to kind of, whether you're black or white, there needs to be a pause, or that is just a mechanism of trying to like overcompensate?
Yeah, Rebecca has a really frantic energy.
Yes, I felt that.
Yeah, she's very busy,
Yes.
right? She wants to run everything. She wants to keep, she has, the pool guy, the windows guy, right? She like has a whole staff that comes in and is trying to work on her house, construction, all this stuff. She's just managing a lot. Her hectic life is all of her own doing, and so I think, when you do that, when you're busy, when you're always trying to get things done, when you're always trying to help people, what that doesn't allow for is self-reflection.
Yes.
So that's what I see happening with Rebecca.
Yeah, so she's intentionally trying to distract herself. Yeah. And so the response to DeAndrea's character is to what? Like, why do they end up befriending one another? Without giving spoilers.
I mean, it's on the back of the book. It won't be a spoiler. I think, Catherine and I really wanted to show what happens a lot of time with parents, which is that, it's our kids,
Yeah.
right? Our kids force us to confront
Yep.
a lot of stuff, right? And so DeAndrea is like, oh my God, I cannot believe I'm about to be out here with all these white folks. Becky is like, I can't believe we have a black family, right? And the kids are like, oh my God, we're wearing the same outfit.
Yeah.
We're besties, you know? And oftentimes that is what at least forces parents to really confront their own biases and prejudices, right? Because our kids are like, we're best friends. We see the best friend and we're like, oh, okay, right? And so this is what happens. Their worlds are sort of forced together through their children's budding friendship, although DeAndrea stays resistant for as long as possible.
Yes, yes, yes. So we are going to take questions in a moment. So if you're thinking of a question, get it up here. I'm gonna go back to my questions. Another thing that I really was interested in is how you all structured the book. So this is when we get into the craft portion of the conversation, because again, 2 minds, 2 different people. How did you all divvy the responsibilities, and what was the impetus of it being the chapters being shorter? Because I felt like that was like a great way to keep up the suspense. I breezed through the book, and then I was looking, I was like, wait, these chapters are really, really short. Can you just explain to the audience what that was, the reasoning behind that?
Well, we wanted to really take the opportunity to show the dual perspectives, right? I mean, we all know this feeling of, reading comments online about an article that you've read or watching something, and you see how people are reacting to it, and it's so wildly different, even around the same thing. And you think, like, how did we all just read or watch the same thing? And so we wanted that perspective too, to show that DeAndrea and Rebecca are like in the same town, sometimes in the same space, and they're having completely different takes on what is happening in the moment. And so that's why we wanted to have the alternating chapters. So every other chapter is DeAndrea and Rebecca, and Christine wrote all of the DeAndrea chapters, and I wrote all of the Rebecca chapters.
Yeah. You just made that sound so easy.
I know.
That's all we did. It was like that.
I feel like it was a little harder than that. But
I think one of the things that we realized early on was why people don't write dual narratives in this way. It's actually very convenient for them not to be so in each other's spaces. And so that challenged us a lot, but we knew that was very important for what we wanted the book to do and the conversations that we wanted folks to have. And I trust Catherine wholeheartedly as someone who has facilitated just uncomfortable conversations and dialogues about race her entire career. And so I put a lot of trust in her, to have these shorter chapters, have these conversations like literally happening like back to back. It was very hard. And there were moments where I might write like dialogue for Becky, and then I would like give her my chapter to read, and she would be like, she would not say that. And the same would happen with DeAndrea. And so we like helped each other with dialogue, but yeah, for the most part, we really just wanted to really just show our characters siloed in the same community. Did you want to add?
And if I can add, because I think what's really important here is that, so Rebecca's frantic, and when we get to DeAndrea, like we slow down and we get her internal life. Because everything about Rebecca is focused on how can DeAndrea serve me, right? How can she make me feel better about being a good white person? And not even thinking about DeAndrea being someone who's just moved to a new city, who's lonely and fearful, and she's going through all this stuff in her family, but that's not in her frame of reference at first at all. Yeah. Rebecca is there, or DeAndrea is there to like fill this need for her. And we wanted to show that and to see how it affects DeAndrea.
Yes. So in my mind, I had a playlist for each of them. And so Rebecca was all Taylor Swift. Yeah. And then Dee was all Beyonce. So I just I could see them in their own worlds. She's playing Karma, she's playing Energy. It just was like, that was the vibe. I'm going to take questions now. I know you have some. Where are the hands? There we go.
Good evening, everyone. My question is, I came in a little late. I'm not sure if you went over this already, but how did you all come up with the title?
You know what? They talked about it a little bit. Let's
Did you?
elaborate.
Yes. So I like the name. So again, 2020, is Becky and Karen.
Becky and
were
Karen.
the worst two names for white women during that time.
Do we want to give them more context of what a Karen is, just in case anyone's watching and doesn't know?
If you do not know what a Becky and Karen is, all right. And so Becky is like synonymous with well-meaning white woman, the basic white woman uniform. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of stereotypes around Becky, but Becky is harmless, right? For the clueless and not intentionally harmless. Let me say that. Karens intend harm, right? And so, what we would hear, and there are actually articles about this, you can Google, it's pretty funny. There are actually some articles about women named Rebecca who want to change their names, and they are just very heartbroken I know, right? I thought it was funny at the time, so I was like, oh, okay, let's call me Rebecca, not Becky, right? And then it became, well, how do you get to this journey, right, of going from this performative, I'm not a Becky, right, to like really seeing what does allyship, what does friendship, what does sisterhood look like in an interracial dynamic, right? So it started off kind of, ha ha ha, you want to change your name and you can't, right? To really becoming a strong part of this narrative to show like what that looks like, that transformation looks
Yeah, well,
like.
the name is Surface too, right? So, I mean, you can change your name, but what does that mean in terms of how you're behaving and serving an allyship role for people, right?
Yeah. And also to say, I want you to call me Rebecca, not Becky, as opposed to, I'm gonna call her Rebecca. That is not a Becky. That is, you know what I mean? Like, so we play on that a lot, and you'll see that throughout the narrative. And then also, I just liked it better than the Becky Chronicles, and so there we have it.
Any more questions? We have another one over there.
I'll stand up. Hello. Catherine, I want to know, Christine talked about how parenting and what our parents did versus what we did. Did you have anything that you brought to your character or their children about parenting that you thought, my parents did this, I do this differently, anything like that?
Yes. So what I thought a lot about was who raised Rebecca and how her family played into that. She grew up in the Midwest, and her family does not hold the same values as she does. I grew up in Colorado. I went to college in Iowa. Half my family agrees with what I do for a living, and others don't. So that is something that I can connect with there. And there's a line, I mean, there's little Easter eggs throughout the book that we worked in, but there's something about her mother's take on race and family that that emerges a little bit. It's a small part, but that was something that really was a part of my life. And so Rebecca has tried to transcend the conservatives like values that she was raised with, and also struggles with like the wealth that she has and growing up lower middle class. And so those are things that I kind of connected with. And then with the parenting, I think mostly what drove me in terms of how I depicted her with her children is just knowing, again, in like all the anti-racism work that we've done with I'm Not Racist, Am I over the years, and then also in the wake of George Floyd, hearing from a lot of white friends who are parents who wanted to know how to raise better white kids. And I wanted to make clear that Rebecca was trying to do that as well.
Yeah, I think too we explored it a little bit with the couples, right? Because I think there's a lot of assumptions that we made. Like we really wanted to challenge like the assumptions and stereotypes, right? And so, of course, DeAndrea is like, ugh, all y'all got money, right? Not knowing Rebecca's dynamic and how she grew up, right? And then within DeAndrea's own marriage, right? Malik grew up with wealth, went to like, you know, independent boarding school, right? And DeAndrea grew up, you know, more impoverished, right? And so just exploring these dynamics and just how it influences, you know, your marriage, how it influences your parenting, all of these things. So we also wove that in too.
We have a question in the front, and then we'll head toward, we'll do one more. And then we're going to have a signing and take photos and do all that fun stuff.
Hi. So I live in McLean, Virginia. It sounds
Rolling
a
Hills,
lot
sorry.
like Rolling Hills. And we have a diversity committee at our school. And I was thinking you could also put this in the nonfiction aisle. And we don't have that much diversity at our school. Some, but there are not many black families. And I was literally thinking here, I want to send a note to the committee to recommend this book for book club. What would you recommend that email say?
Ooh.
How would you summarize? How would I introduce this book and the conversation?
Oh, that's a great question. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead, expert on difficult dialogue.
Yeah. That's a good question. I'm going to keep thinking. I have an answer now, but I'll probably have a different answer for you that I'll text you tomorrow. I would just, I think what we really find important, and we're like very clear about this, and when we talk about the book, is that we did not set out to talk about race, right? This is not a book about race. We think that we can move beyond a little bit of always saying, like, let's sit down and have a conversation about race, because that scares people. It's heavy for people who are dealing with the weight of racism every day. What we want is to say, let's have a conversation about how we're showing up for one another. Not saying all the other stuff isn't important too. It informs everything we do. But that's what I would say. How are we showing up for each other as a community? And here's a book that helps us talk about that.
Yeah. And I think too, and again, have to thank Catherine for this, because I had that parent diversity committee meeting, my first draft. Whew, it was tense. It was rough. It was hard. And I think, you know, Catherine pushed back, the editor pushed back, right? I had it would have been very uncomfortable for readers. And I think if we want to welcome folks into having these conversations, you know, we do, so it's not, the Parent Diversity Committee meeting is fair and funny, right? And I think, you know, one of the things that we were able to show is these conversations don't have to be so hard and heavy, right? And so I think when y'all recommend this to your Parent Diversity Committee meetings, you know, it is an opportunity for us to talk about these things with levity, right? It was, you know, it's so important that we can laugh at ourselves and have these conversations with, I mean, Catherine and I laughed at ourselves so many times when writing this book because we were calling each other out. Yeah.
I'm laughing, I'm thinking about it because there are so many scenes where I feel like you just see things that are recognizable. That's the best way I can put it. And if you read it with this perspective of this is not this like generalization of people, like
Yes.
this is a character, this is a person, this is a character, this is a person, and we all exist in this space, I think
Yeah.
you'll enjoy it without trying to like add too much other meaning to it. Just like read it for what it is and like build your own ideas and opinions, you know?
Yeah. I know we had one more.
I know we had one more question. If you please raise your hand again and we'll pass the mic to you. There was someone. Okay, the gentleman back there in the checkered, yes, and then we'll close out.
Hey.
I'm so excited to read this and for you both. I'll just say, like, I feel like having witnessed these last 3 years, it was a very different climate that the book was birthed in than it is now, in terms of like far-right backlash. You had the critical race theory. You had the attack on LGBTQ plus community. You had attack on women's bodies, reproductive rights. I'm just curious, I don't know exactly when the book ended, and I also know that it's meant to have levity and lightness, but I'm just curious of like some of that intersectionality or the attacks of white supremacy like is in the book.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely address it. And I think one of the things that we've seen as practitioners is like there was so much hitting over the head over the last 3 years that like at a certain point you're not teaching anyone anything, right? And the goal is not to make people feel bad about their race or their identity or even some of the things that they don't know, right? The goal is to invite people in, to have conversations, right? To make them feel comfortable, to find an entry point, right? And so I think we did, I mean, I hope we did a really good job of balancing that, right? It's not all ha 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 because race is not all ha ha ha. Life is not all ha ha ha, right? But we do have these moments where we have to laugh about some of this stuff, right? Where we have to cry about some of this stuff. And so, you know, what we tried to show was a very real world, right? Where maybe Rebecca's kids confront her at breakfast one morning, right? And like, how are we, what does black even mean? That girl is brown, right? Like what, right? So we may have those conversations, or we may have, you know, DeAndrea and her girlfriends maybe making some little sly comments about Becky, right? Like, but we wanted to show the totality of our lives. And one of the things that Catherine said, we were working on the ending, and the ending was tough, right? Because we didn't want it to be too teachy and preachy. And she said, you know, Christine, this is a book about sisterhood and friendship and motherhood and adulting and life, and we just don't ignore race. And to me, that was so powerful. That's the takeaway from the book. So yes, we address everything that has been happening in the last 3 years, and we don't ignore race.
I think that's the perfect way to close. Thank you both. Congratulations. So we're going to do a signing, and before because we have some folks watching online, how can we support and follow you both?
Yes, please, please, buy the book. Number one, buy the book, read the book, and more importantly, leave reviews for the book, right? Yeah. Because what happens is that those of us that don't want us to have these conversations, they've already started leaving their reviews. They started leaving them the minute the book was we were like, how you leaving a 1-star and the book ain't, we still writing it. How are you even, what are you talking about, right? And so one of the things that we understand and what we know is that, you know, our reviews, real reviews matter, right? Like having these conversations, telling people you have to buy this book, right? You have to have this book at your book club. Yeah. This is a perfect book club book, right? Like if we want to have conversations, if we want to move this work forward, we know that that's what it takes.
Yeah, I think with any kind of, whether it's a film like I've done or a book, I don't think that we really know what to do with it until we're in a space making meaning of it together. So it's not just reading it, it's being in community with other people. And so that's what I really, really hope happens with the book, and that we get a chance to engage with readers as well. That's what I'm looking forward to the most, is after you all start reading it and want to start talking about it and having conversations about it in your own specific communities, in your McLean, Virginia, or anywhere, that we want to be part of that in some way.
Yeah, and you can find us on Instagram. We run our own pages. We answer our DMs, right? We've been doing this work for a very long time. That's how we met. We're friends in real life. Like, we get it. And there aren't any questions that we have not heard before. There is not an uncomfortable conversation that we have not had. And so I think, you know, reach out, you know, like feel free to reach out to us. Feel free to reach out to your friends. As Catherine said, like, have conversations around the book. Because again, that's what moves this work forward.
Thank you both.
You're welcome. Thank y'all for coming out.